Was to build a connection between the Turkish people and people around the world. Building a connection between the Turkish people and people and the presidency also a connection between the Turkish and Turkish language people and the presidency also a connection between the Turkish and soft power. And when we were discussing these topics, we have realized that according to Yunus Emre way of thinking, there is already a connection between the human beings and we have realized that according to Yunus Emre way of thinking, there is already a connection between the human beings and this we have realized that according to Yunus Emre way of thinking, there is already a connection between the human beings and this we have realized that according to Yunus Emre way of thinking, there is already a connection between the human beings and this we have realized that according to Yunus Emre way of thinking, there is already a connection between the human sometimes there's disconnect among them. And Yunus Emre, Hacı Bektaş Veli, when we look at their way of thinking, we understand it much better. And UNESCO, as you mentioned, is seeing their value and their way of thinking. I personally think that it much better. And UNESCO, as you mentioned, is seeing their value. French, their way of thinking. And at the end of the 70s, it's much better. UNESCO, translated is seeing their value. French, the Bektaşi, Ali art of the Istanbul, much better. Translated is seeing and work French, the Bektaşi Ministry of Art of the Istanbul, translated and work in seeing and work French, the Bektaşi Ministry of Art of the Istanbul, translated and reflected there. And in the UK and our other embassies also are seeing these very important values. And of course, as well as supporting the artists who have worked on these, we also need to focus on revealing what has already been done. Sometimes we try to do things over and over again because we do not realize they have been done before, and this is also an important issue that we need to realize. And I want to underline that as a person who is performing in concerts, I can say that we see our culture inside the political geography that we see today. For years, we have kept these political boundaries. Let's say our culture was narrowed down in these political boundaries. However, our people in Anatolia, in Istanbul, wherever, they have a cultural world from India to even Northern Africa, to Europe. We have not seen it for years. For example, in the conservatory in Tunisia, I had a seminar, and there the students of conservatories, in order to earn their diplomas, they need to play all works of art of tamburi. So, or in Palestine, we performed a concert. In Istanbul, longas, sirtas were very famous, of course, and more than half of the crowd in the room uh, know all of these works even by heart. We are not aware of these. Many organizations and institutions are not aware of these. For example, in Indonesia, um, not Fatih, Beyazıt II, or the Ottoman sultans sent help to them against the Portuguese. And I have seen that people of Bali, they were playing drums to show it as Turkish music. So our cultural world actually extends all the way to these places. It is wrong not being able to see this until today, but after today, if we can, we need to use this opportunity. Of course, especially in France, the French usually highlight the concept of civilization. And the Germans brought in the concept of culture. Actually, civilization is something that is built upon building blocks, and it is a stage, and it covers all of these stages. In this sense, we should not refrain from making self-criticism. Of course, Yunus Emre Institute was established in 2010s. So in order for us to build upon our values, culture seems more related to traditions. And in that sense, we should not refrain from making self-criticisms as well. And Yunus Emre Institute was able to be set up in 2010s. So in thinking that we are building upon these existing building blocks and values, culture seems to be our in our essence, in our way of doing. So considering this, we should not refrain from making self-criticism. Even Yunus Emre Institute was established in the 2010s. So it covers, of course, all relevant values to be built upon. It is a way of thinking, and we should not refrain from self-criticism. Yunus Emre Institute was only established in 2010s, and in order to build upon the existing values, it is considered as an essence. So Yunus Emre Institute was established in 2010s, so building upon these blocks are important. So you have touched upon a very important point. So we need, when we compare the Western culture, especially after the 18th century, when we consider the compositors of those eras, all world accepted them as prestige artists, and the operas, symphonical orchestras, we also have them, and the African countries also have them. But do you think that the farm villagers in Germany enjoy listening to Mozart? We should think about culture and arts in two ways. One is the people's regional and ethnical culture, and the other one is the universal sense cultural world. So with the impact of the Western world, we are seeing our own culture ethnically.
Vitrinin eserine koymuş Türk etnik
So
müziği.
it, for example, says Turkish ethnical music. Uh, and
Alman
Bach
eşlik müziği,
does
kontrol
not
müziği
says
diye yazmak da
German.
bariz bir
Bach
şey.
music does not
Yani
is not labeled
biz
as
dahi
German ethnical
bazı
music. So
miras gibi
even
kültürel
uh,
müzik
when we
kültürü
think of our
böyle bir bölgesel folklorik
cultural
bir etnik bir şey gibi
music,
görüyorlar.
we also have
Ancak
started seeing it as an
herhalde
ethnical characteristic,
batılaşma
and
süreci
probably this
içerisindeki
was
bir
brought
konteksin
along with a
devamı.
complex in
Yani
the
ben
process of
Kudsi
westernization.
neyse,
Whatever
Mevlana
is
neyse Shakespeare'in de aynı
Rumi,
eşitliğinde
we need to
görebilmemiz gerekiyor.
see
Fakat bir
Rumi
tercih
in an
konusu.
equal
O tercihte biraz da bir
value of
seçim konusu
what
haline
Shakespeare
geliyor.
is.
Bu
So,
tabii yanlış bir
of
şey.
course,
Tabii muhakkak siyaset ve
between
kültür arasında, sanat
politics
arasında
and culture
bir
and arts, there
direnç, bir
is a
ilişki var.
direct connection and
Ta
relation.
eski Yunan
And
zamanından
this
beri
is
gelen bir şey.
mentioned
Yani bir
since
toplumun değişmesi,
the
onun
Western
müziğinin değişmesine bağlı bir
societies.
sonuç, ilişki
And
süreç olduğunu
changing the
söylenmiş.
music
Yani
of a society also changes
biz de
its
tabii bir yandan
civilization. And we
medeniyet
did
değişimi
experience
yaşıyoruz.
a
Bu
change in
medeniyet
the
değişimi kıra,
civilization.
kıra bir medeniyet değişimi.
So
Onun içerisinde
inside
kayıplar
that
olması
transition,
çok
having some
normal.
losses
Zaten
is
bir
very,
cumhuriyetle
very
başlatmıyoruz.
natural. We should not
Daha öncesinde
see its
daha
initiation point
hüccamet
as
zamanı, istilahi
the
dönemler,
Republic. As you know, we
ortada bir
had
ıslahat
the
devri var.
tulip era,
Ondan
and then
sonra
an
işte
Islahat era, the rehabilitation area,
şimdi
and then Tanzimat
Tanzimat
era.
döneminde
So considering all
bütün bu
of these
aşamaları
stages,
yavaş
slowly
yavaş
by
artık
slowly, some
vazgeçilmekten
things
geliyor.
were
Ben bunu
abandoned.
hep isim
And
olarak
I
söylerim.
give
Mesela
it always
İsmail
as an
Dede
example. For example,
meşhur
Ismail. So
Mustafa
Ismail Dede.
Dede
Uh, in the times
Abdülmecit
of
zamanında
Abdülmecit,
Batı
Sultan Abdülmecit, is that
insanların
this art is no longer
bizim
valued,
oyun bozuldu
and
diye iki talebesinin yanına
he
alıyor ve hacca
takes two of
gidiyor ve
his
orada vefat
students with
ediyor.
him and goes to
Kabirlendiği
Hajj,
Arap
and he
usulünde
dies there, and he
defnediliyor. Sonra
was
tabii Bahadır
also
gelince orada
buried there,
Rum müttefiklerinden
and
sonra da benimliyor.
we see his tomb there
Şunu
as well.
demek istiyorum
So
yani İsmail Dede'nin
Ismail
İstanbul'u
Dede
artık
left
terk
Istanbul,
etmesi ki
and
bu
this
da bir
shows that
yolunda
probably in
bir şekilde
1820s, in 1830s,
yani
uh,
bir
is
noktadır. Yani
when he left
Osmanlı
Istanbul, it was a
yönetimleri
turning
artık
point.
Batı'nın
So Istanbul, also,
yönetimi
the
altında
Ottoman civilization
erikmiş
was
durumdalar. Ondan sonra bir
actually,
şeyler devam etmiştir.
the
Devam
Ottoman
eden de
civilization lost
işte
against the Western civilization.
bizim
This
Türk
is a
müziği,
turning
sanat
point
müziği
showing that. So when
ve
today we call
bir
Turkish
tarihimiz de var.
art music, it is not a continuation
Medeniyetlerimizin
of
de var.
history. It's not a
Sosyal
continuation
konulara
of
adapte ola hale
a
gelmiş
culture.
bir
It
dil
is
var.
a sense of music. So
Bu da
this
tabii
shows
gösteriyor ki
us
yani
that
siyaset, sanat ve
politics,
kültür
arts,
birbirinden çok
culture,
bağlı,
uh,
bağlantılı. E, Bu arada tabii
not
sadece
only
sanatı
art, of
yetinmeyecek
course,
bir
but
insan. Kültürü de o
it's
sanat
not, of
altyapımızda
course, enough
bulabilir.
to raise artists or
Tabii ki
see artists.
yani
Uh, we need to also
bazen
raise people who can
zevklerimiz
enjoy this
şartlanma
art.
nedeniyle
Sometimes our
bu şartlanma
enjoyments
olmadan
is,
şartlanma olmadan
let's say,
gerçek olarak
conditioned.
bir
Without being
zevk
conditioned,
sevme
when you
konusunda
feel
o
the
zaman o
love and
sanatta iyi
enjoyment,
geliyor.
that becomes the love of art, actually.
Tabii müziğin çok ciddi
And
bir
there is a
etkisi
very
var.
important impact of
Ee,
music, of course. In our own culture, we see that there is also a lack of self-confidence. And with Westernization, we see that on one side we have this clash of, let's say, cultures, and this is also very meaningful. And we transfer types of music, and in mod developing in our own geography, as you know, we have we see art as a gift, as a bounty, as we call it ihsan. However, ihsan actually is aesthetic. So this bounty is aesthetics. And 80 years before the death of our prophet, it was also mentioned that Bounty means human beings. So in the existing of human beings, in the core of human beings, we have this ihsan, we have this bounty. And in the human beings world, seeing art, seeing it with music, with paintings, pictures, we are trying to give meaning to our life, and it is further enhancing our lives. And Anatolia geography has this treasure for years, this new music, and although we have a new political era, in the basis of this geography, we have this existence of human beings. And this existence is carried all over the world with new windows opened by you and the artists. And we say it's great that we have them. It's great that they introduce these cultures to us. For 10 years, as Yunus Emre Institute, we have been carrying out various activities, and we are observing that
Ve bazen
sometimes
işte
in
Pakistan'da
Pakistan or
ya da
in
Amerika'da
USA, we see
görebiliyoruz.
some
Çünkü
elements
yeni bir
because a
ufuk
new
açılıyor.
horizon
Sizin
opens, and
özgeçmişiniz de
your
buna aslında
background
biraz
also
delalet ediyor, işaret
shows this
ediyor.
to us.
Yani bir dönem
In a
70'li
certain period
yıllara
until the
kadar Türkiye'de
1970s,
ikinci sınıf sanat
you were
olarak görülen
engaged
bir
with a tradition
geleneğin
which was seen as a
Batı'yla
secondary class
buluşturduğunuzda
art in
oradaki
Turkey. But
ilgiyi
when you
aslında o
introduce
sanatın
this way
kıymetini
of
de
art to the
size
Western
fark
culture,
ettirmiş
it
olmalı. Yani
probably
kişisel
made you
olarak onu
realize
nasıl
its values.
değerlendiriyorsun?
What do you think about this personally?
Evet. Maşallah. Allah uzun ömür versin.
And some things can be highlighted, but this was only possible after 1980s. As you also mentioned, I personally, and I'm not the only one in the family. My grandfather and my father was also engaged in this. And in 1980s, my grandfather lived in an era where Sufi culture was seen even as prohibited. Some provisions of the Mevlevi thinkings and provisions were even prohibited. So considering this, there was a hymn he produced in a tune, and he was not able to perform. And they were interrogated actually after they tried to perform this. And the reason was that he knew
Evet.
about
Tabii,
that,
ayırt
and he
ediliyor.
was able to distinguish between them. And in the state radio, in state TV, we were not able to see Sufi music, but for the first time in 1960s, there was a Ramadan program. And because in that program there was the idea of Sufism, and they were dismissed from the television program and they were prosecuted. Considering all of these developments, the Turkish Music Conservatory was established in 1976. How can a type of music be an obstacle against the civilization? It is something that cannot be fathomed. if someone listens to Ismail Dede, would they be distancing themselves from civilization? No, these were political mistakes. And rather than trying to revenge this, we need to repair this. And hopefully Yunus Emre Enstitüsü will be able to repair this. Yes,
Evet,
hopefully
yani inşallah bu
this
sene
year together
Yunus Emre'nin
we will
nefesini, Anadolu nefesini
convey Yunus Emre's breath, the breath of Anatolia, to
hakikaten
different
insanlığın
geographies, because
ihtiyacı var
really
bu farklı
the
söylemlere.
humanity needs
Çünkü
this
temeldeki
different
felsefe
discourse.
önemli.
Its
Sanat
core
aslında o
philosophy is
temeldeki
important, and the
felsefeyi taşıyor, estetik bir
art
şekilde
is
taşıyor. Onun
conveying
için de
this
bizde
core philosophy
aslında
aesthetically,
biraz da
and
daha çok
we
gizem
actually have
katmak
this
lazım. Yani
mysticism.
isim
Even
olarak
in the
bile
name, we
işte
say tasavvuf
tasavvuf
musikisi.
deniyor. Oysa
In Turkish, this is
muhtemelen
how we call
sizin
it, Sufi music.
şeyinizde
I heard it in
yani
some of
tasavvuf
your
erbabı ya da
interviews.
tasavvufla
The
uğraşan
people who
insanların
deal with
dinlediği müzik
tasavvuf
olabilir.
can
Yoksa
have
onların
this music they
ürettiği
listen to,
yani bir
but
gelenekmiş
this is
gibi.
considered as a
Kaldı ki
tradition, as if they
yani
are producing
neyde de
this
aynı
type
gizem
of music. But the same
aktarılıyor. Yani
mysticism is
onun
also
sırrı
reflected
hep bir
in
sır
Ney, in
arayışında
the
var.
flute Ney.
Hem İslam
There's this
coğrafyası hem
search in
Anadolu coğrafyasında. Yani bunun
Islamic geography, in Anatolia
yaşadığınız o
geography,
ortamlarda
we are
yaşadığınız
seeing this.
için
You're
bunun
living in
hikmeti
these
nedir? Yani neden
environments.
böyle
So what do you
daha
think
bilimsel
is
hani
behind
bilim
this? More in terms of its scientific background, what do you think could be the reason behind this?
diliyle
Why
açıklanabiliyor,
do you think we do not explain it in the more scientific language? In Ramadan, before they break their fast, before iftar, they listen to the Sufi music, and they know this as religious music. But we need to go beyond this cultural conditioning. We need to be able to find this as a sense that we enjoy. Since 1960s, as a person who performs concerts, for example, in the Swedish embassy, when we perform a concert, they hear this music. And this is why I believe that this is in the nature of things.
Evet. Çok güzel. Evet.
Great. Yes, that's a great way of
Tabii
thinking.
tabii. Evet.
Sure.
Evet. Evet.
So everything that you do can be a part of some other things.
Evet. Evet.
Everything is interlinked. So as you know, we have the verses of Quran, and with these verses, we always remember Allah, and we feel it spiritually. And this is the way of living of Rumi and Yunus. So these are the people who live their beliefs in a way of pleasure. And Mevlevi tradition is called tawajud. So music is a way of invitation to these senses of your beliefs. But today everything is subject to consumption, and music should not be considered as a consumable, and it should be considered as something that feeds their spirits. In Turkey, we know and introduce Yunus Emre as a folk poet, but actually Yunus Emre is a Sufi poet, tasawwufi poet. Almost 80% of these hymns that we have been singing were actually created by Yunus Emre. So considering all of these, they are all these poems reflected by Yunus Emre. Yes, in order to be able to define this modern person, let's say in quotation marks, the God of a modern person is science. So when you explain something scientifically, people understand it. But in our tradition, we have 18,000 people being in zikr, which is the way of thinking and having these beliefs to be only understood through tasawwuf. And Yunus Emre, Mevlana, Rumi, we need to be able to know these traditions in order to just open the door to these understandings, and we need to be able to understand this. Yunus explains unity in pluralism, and there's Mevlana, Rumi, and we have Rumi who speaks to a drop, a water drop, or Yunus converses with a flower. So today's people actually do need to feel this modernity as well. And beyond all these languages, beyond all races, there's this way of thinking that all lives complement each other, and maybe we need to define this way of thinking. Yes, of course, but in order for these to be possible, there is this issue of transformation in Yunus Emre, Rumi, Hacı Bektaş, and other people of language, and Rumi also loves Hacım Senai, for example, and all of these people have works that they have created. So human beings' knowledge creates this pleasure outside these verses of Quran, and also we have this intellectual let's say this intellectual gift, as you mentioned, ihsan, as you mentioned. So it is possible that they can earn this aesthetics, but these two are not disconnected from each other. One of our problems that we have today is that let's look back at the Tanzimat era. Let's think about Sultan Abdulaziz. He was a sultan, and he has a waltz, actually. He composed it for an orchestra. It's a waltz, but he's also a neyzen. He used to play the flute ney, and he also composed music in these tunes. So back then, people, although they were pleased with the Western culture, they did not abandon their own cultures as well. And they have these aesthetic pleasures as well. They can differentiate between the two. Yes, of course. And this exists in all fine arts, in architecture, in music, in literature. This has been developed. But through the time, we abandoned entirely the eastern wing of the world. We thought that it would prevent us from becoming civilized. This was a big loss, and we need to close this gap. And while we are trying to close this gap, sometimes we are focusing or trying to build a bridge between the values that do not exist, that is not very logical. For example, we need to actually refrain from chauvinist ways of thinking. If something is Turkish, just because it's Turkish, it doesn't have to be beautiful. If something is made by a Muslim, it does not automatically mean that it's beautiful. We don't need to look at it as ours, but we should try to look at it as the right one, as the beautiful one. And with a nostalgic feeling, we built some crooked bridges, but we need to go beyond it. And our classical music after Selim III, we thought that it started after Selim III, but this is completely wrong. Of course, Selim III and after, it was a period where we had Ismail Dede as well, so it was a very rich period. But before that, there's Abdülkadir Meravi, and he was engaged in divan music, and Beragi Herat was also alive, and Timur took him to Samarkand, and then in Herat is a great musician, and he's the father of Eastern music. And this person's works, books, Jamil Elham, and he has these books, and they were even read in Istanbul, and his works were played in Istanbul. And today, the Eastern world has forgotten about them. Herat also, Sultan Baykara, one of the grandsons of Timur, Vezir Alişir Nevai, Şehir İslamoğlu Mosque. So these musics were Meragi's musics that were performed, and the Sultan composed one poem of Hacı Bayram Veli, Doğru Gönlüm. It's really exquisite. Maybe back then, this universal idea was adopted. In today's world, we see more chauvinist or ethnical approach is adopted, and it's actually upsetting for the entire humanity. Consider that Ziya Gökalp had an idea, and we said it was the remainders of Byzantine music, but Byzantine music, for example, Meragi was not listening to Byzantine music every week. So these were theses which were not proven, and some generations followed these thoughts, but we need to go beyond this. For example, Babur Shah. In India, the Mongolian Sultan Babur Shah, who set up a state in India, he had his own book, and it was in Turkish, a notebook in Turkish. We are talking about Turkish language, but it doesn't start with Yunus. It has a way back history. In the East, in Khorasan, in India, in Ghaznavi state, when we look back at all of them, there are also there's also a civilization which is part of our world. I do think that the 20th century, especially after capitalism with this economic system, all around the world, the material understanding was put into forefront, and people thought that they needed to invade more geographical areas and exploit all these resources, and the humanity lived two world wars within 1 century. But when we look back in India, Baburname, when we look at these works of art, if you have a way of thinking that you can convey, if you have this goodness that you can convey, all doors are open to you. Therefore, this modern people should be served with the beautiful one and the good one. That is why I say the philosophy of Ankara is of Anatolia is not based on competition. It is based on accompaniment, refakat. Refik means the journey of life, and if there is a connection between all living things, among all living things, we need to think of ways for easing and beautifying this journey. So if you do not have materials that you can carry forward, don't try to convey this, don't try to open these journeys. On one hand, we have our historical beauties. On the other hand, today is very important. So this aesthetics that we are producing, again, if they already exist in different geographies, we should convey them to ourselves and work for the humanity. You are right. Yes, you're right. For example, inside Moldova, we have Fulbright, Yunus Emre Enstitüsü inside there. There's 300,000 Turkish people are enhancing their Turkish there, and we do think that it's very, very valuable. Therefore, apart from political discourse, when we highlight culture and arts, we see different ethnical structures and religious belongings can be highlighted. And as you mentioned, even in Finland, when they listen to ney, this flute, without prejudices, it opens a new horizon for them, a new meaningful world for them all around the world. Indian music, philosophy, yoga is actually systematized somehow. And we also have these works that come out of Anatolia, and we have an understanding we should have a purpose of introducing them to the world. And in this sense, for years, both theoretically and practically, you have been working on these, and they are very, very precious for us. In one of your interviews, you talk about a book in Spain, a book of Ibn Arabi. You worked on it, and us in Maghreb, in northern African countries, this is very important because Spain and France is connected to that, and culturally revealing that connection is very important. So if you can share it with our viewers, we would be very happy. So we have been discussing this topic, and some of the projects that I'm engaged with are called as fusion projects by some people. And what I'm interested in, actually, when I produce a new project, in the background, there should be, for example, historical personality or a religious or a cultural connection. For example, Ibn Arabi, when we look at his verses, he was born in Spain, in Murcia. And when I was performing a lot of concerts back then in Spain, and I was good with the government representatives there, and I used to say, why don't you work on this, because this is a common person that we share. And they gave us me an opportunity, and in one day we had a symposium, and hundreds of flamenco musicians were there, and we created this project in Barcelona. We had open air concerts for 5,000 people, and it was an immense attraction point for them, because the project had a historical image, and there was a connection between the past and today, and it's important for people. The same thing happened in the year 2000 in Berlin with the Goethe project. Goethe Eastern Divan literature was very important. He actually wrote a great letter to the Prophet and poems. And the Eastern world's poets are bigger than ours, he said. And he said, our poets are only arguing with each other, but Eastern poets are great. And I had this read by the Germans in German. And we performed 11, 12 concerts in Germany. Right now, one of the projects is that, again, I had an Italian project similar to that. It was a poem of Dante, La Vita Nuova, a new life. He had a poem book. And just as in Goethe's works of art, I wanted to compose for these poems. In Florence, there was a festival, and they really liked the idea of this project, but due to COVID, we were not able to actualize it. But last summer, we were supposed to perform that concert, but hopefully in the future that can be materialized, because these are very important for me. From one hand, we are introducing ourselves, and on the other hand, we reveal people who have shown interest to our world previously. Yes, as we reveal these connections, it also brings along or it also eliminates these political or chauvinist discourses. We should not blame the politicians for all. The cultural people are the compartments of life, of course, as life has compartments, as we extend the life of art. The other areas can be narrowed down in response to that. This is what's good and what's right. So we need to work all together in this sense. I also can mention one more thing. Sorry for interrupting you, but you said Moldavia, for example. Moldavia prince, the Prince of Moldavia, Kantemir, Dimitri Kantemir, that person also has his compositions and works, more than 300 works of art. And right now it is a part of our heritage. Yes, it's an important heritage. And we had a couple of activities as the Institute with the Romanian Institute. And for the first time, I had the concert tour in Europe in terms of Kantemir and his works. So he was not heard before. And we tried to introduce his works. But of course, today, he's popular. Kantemir is popular. So it opens certain doors. As new doors are opened, people see their own worlds. In Notre Dame, there was a state conservatory, and I am also a lecturer in the Notre Dame State Conservatory. I have a Greek student. He also worked on Byzantine music as well. And when it came for his thesis time, we have Retraki Posasios. We call him Tiryaki, and he has his notebooks. And we said to that Greek student to find them and write your thesis on them. And he found his works in a monastery. It was his own handwriting, and we had a concert in Italy with these works coming out of this notebook. And there we have seen the good words for the sultans, Ottoman sultans, in official celebrations and in religious celebrations. They all of these Jewish, Christian, and other religious leaders express their gratitude to the Sultan. And in all of these days in celebrations, they express their gratitude. And maybe we can get these letters of gratitude and we can create music out of them and make a recording out of them. Another project that I have, by the way, this Tetraki, when we had his works in Venice, we had a concert from his works. And 1 week later, we were invited to Helen Cultural Center in London. Let's do this together. We can. Our directors are also listening to you. Maybe they will call you after the program. Of course, they are very precious in the Aegean Sea. We can feel this nice wind rather than it was your plane, it was my plane, it was your boat, it was my boat. In order to silence that tension, we can have these cultural activities. Yes, the Ottoman classical music, especially the last era classical music, 90%, 80% were composed by the Armenians. Are the musical instrument makers, the best makers were Armenian. And on the other hand, we need to be able to appreciate that as well. For that reason, we do really see this geography as a geography of peace, and making this a geography of peace should be a core duty of cultural people as well. Otherwise, that conflicting discourse is sucking our energy, because people have limited energy and power, and every day trying to find new arguments is really absorbing our energy, and we cannot perform our existential duties. We need to work towards this. Let me also mention that now we are talking about conflict. We are talking about conflict among civilizations. We are talking about a competition of beliefs among the cultures, but they're not true. I talked about Petraki, for example, Petraki Rampadarios. This person is a master of Ney, is actually my colleague at the same time. Petraki was the head Ney performer in Galata, and he in Malazgirt. So they're open. It's actually perfect how open-minded they are. In Galata Mevlevihane, the dervishes went and said that he's actually one of our people. You can do your own celebration after his death. We can do our own way of commemorating him, we said. They said. So these are all showing us how in the past that was not a problem in this sense. If we look at the French, they have their famous journey books, and one of them is Gérard de Varva's journey book, and it says that Istanbul is among the great castles, and Christians could not enter because it was all Muslims. But inside these areas of citadels, there are a lot of synagogues, churches, the Muslims live there, Christians live there, Jews live there. But since it was a Latin Catholic person, he could not understand it, and he generalized it and said Christians cannot enter these walls of citadel. Not only in Istanbul, but in all big cities of the Mediterranean, we see that. You go to Morocco and you see that the Jew music they perform in synagogue is Andalus music, actually. It is the same case in Tunisia. And as the Istanbul Jews has a culture of mahturim, actually. It's Shabbat on Saturday nights. When they finish Saturday nights, they celebrated, and Baftirim word is actually linked with iftar. And Yunus Pasha has his own expressions, and they add Jewish expressions over that, and that is how they celebrate their Saturday nights. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already are the people of a civilization who live in harmony, and we should not have a problem of rebuilding this. Yes, of course, but large audiences, masses create their own beliefs with symbols, and bringing them on the forefront once again and expressing them symbolically is very precious, because not everyone is knowledgeable about this background. So there is a verse from the world of illumination, because I was told we need to wrap up, by the way, because I was told that the program was for 1 hour. That anecdote is that one king was in deathbed, and he has 3 sons, and he has 1 ring, and he says, whoever I give this ring as an inheritance would become the king. And then 3 sons come to the deathbed of that king, and there are also 2 similar rings, imitation rings, and they put on this ring to all 3 of them, and the sons say that, who will become the king now? We all have rings. And the king says, whoever acts as a king will become the king. So among the religions, the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, whoever lives more ethically and aesthetically, whoever creates beautiful products for humanity, that is the king. So for us, we can be Turkish or French, really whatever we do for the humanity, not in terms of perception and propaganda, really ethically and aesthetically. If we create beautiful things, we would be the king. We would assume the inheritance, because the main aim is to serve humanity. If you allow me, let me also give you an anecdote. It is very relevant. That's why I wanted to say it. This Molla Jami, I am talking about that one. There is a shepherd who lives in the mountain, and this shepherd has not seen anybody other than his parents, only the sheep and goats. after the parents die, he's alone and he says, let me go down to the city and let me see how other people are. And when he goes down to the city, he sees this crowd and he was very shocked and he was very naive. And he says, how would I know who I am if I lose myself? And back then there's this small string on a wall, and he puts the string on his ankle and he says, okay, I should look at this string, and if I lose myself, I would find myself from this string. So all of when he was walking around the city, this shepherd was tired and was sleeping, and the other person, seeing that string, untied the string and put it on his own ankle. And after the shepherd wakes up, he is shocked because he couldn't see the string. And the shepherd says to the guy next to him, if you are me, who am I? Why I'm explaining this anecdote is because we have this cultural, immaterial inheritance. This is as is string. If we do not have this inside of us, we would continue to fight. But if it is inside us and not outside us, we should find ourselves. We can find ourselves. Unfortunately, there's this fight of strings all around the world, but whoever experiences this inside would find themselves. This is the same case for music. Whoever loves this type of music, it's their music. Whoever loves Rumi, their Mevlana. Whoever loves Yunus Emre, they are Yunus Emre. So may Allah open our hearts and may He help us putting all these values inside our hearts. Thank you very much. Let's close the show with your great advice. Thank you, and I wish you all success. And in all of your endeavors, in all of your projects, I hope that you'll be successful, and I hope they will continue, and we are following your success. Thank you very much, and have a good evening, everyone, and regards from Ankara.